on the specifics.
So you had, there were, I think, two or more parts to your question. One was on real estate and gold and other assets. So earlier the rate was 20% with indexation. It has now been reduced to 12.5% without indexation. If you assume that the rate of return on real estate is typically above 10% per annum, and if you take inflation at about 4% per annum, the real rate of return was earlier, let's say, somewhere between 6 and 16% per annum in real estate. If it was 16%, 20% of 16% was being taxed. The effective rate was 16%. It has gone down to 12.5%. If the rate of return was 10% per annum nominal, it has also remained approximately the same at 12.5%. So actually there is either a reduction or no change in respect of the effective rate of tax on property and gold. Now, as regards the equity, yes, it has gone up from 10 to 12.5, but you'll also find that unlisted equity has gone down from 20 with indexation to 12.5 without indexation. Basically, we have a very, very simple, easy regime. All listed, all unlisted are at 12.5% long term. And all are at 20%, I mean, equities are at 20% and everything else is at applicable rate for short term. So yes, short term has gone up, and yes, long term has been rationalized. It has not necessarily gone up. And Sanjay, would you like to add anything?
One point I would like to add over here is that we also need to keep in mind as to the kind of people who are actually paying these taxes, the capital gains on the securities, the listed securities especially. And so over there, when we did this analysis for the year 22-23, we found that about 88% of the tax is actually coming from people who have an income of more than 15 lakh. 61% of that income is actually coming from people who have an income of more than 1 crore.
That is income on capital gains on this.
And we are all aware that otherwise, the standard rate is, about 30%. And for some it can go up to 39%. So this marginal, very small marginal increase is actually impacting only those, primarily those who have an income of more than 15 lakh rupees per year.
Okay, number 3.
On capital gains.
Ma'am, Timsi Jaipuria from CNBC TV 18. You announced a very lucrative new tax regime with changes in tax slabs. A lot of new changes are there in the income tax side, on the revenue side. And in the speech, you mentioned that revenue foregone will be around 29,000 crore rupees, whereas government will now try to mobilize around 30,000 crore rupees. What will be these revenue mobilization measures, and from where do you think this foregone revenue will be recovered? If you can highlight, where are you foregoing the revenue and where are you going to recoup this revenue from?
First of all, it is not just because we've mentioned it in this budget, but the attempt to widen the tax net is something which we've been repeatedly saying, that India's tax net will have to be widened, whether it is in the direct taxation or indirect. Second, there are also now the PSU dividends which are improving because their valuations have gone up really high. And their performance is also now substantially increased. So revenue mobilization is not just tax-based, you have non-tax revenue mobilizations which are also coming up. Then we had for almost now 3 years been talking about asset monetization, which is not selling of assets, but optimum utilization of those assets which are lying in the form of unutilized stadiums or land which is available with PSUs which can be utilized for better purposes. That's a third one. Fourth, you're also looking at generating resources from newer areas. So in all those, the revenue is going to be mobilized better, and as a result of which the revenue foregone will be now made up for, is our expectation. We've said that in the budget. In my speech itself I mentioned it. And I'm sure there are secretaries who will want to add to it. Sanjay?
Ma'am, I'll give the details. 37,000 crore, 29,000 crore in direct taxes and 8,000 crore in indirect taxes. So 29,000 crore direct taxes primarily comprises of three taxes, which is the increase in the STT only on derivatives, which is only on futures and options. And secondly, the buyback tax, which is to be now done in the hands of the recipient. While on the one hand, it will rationalize the tax and be more equitous and fair, because those who should be paying the taxes, higher taxes, in the higher income groups, they will pay higher tax, and those who are in nil tax category or in lower tax category, they don't have to pay a tax or a lower tax. While it does that, at the same time, it does bring in some revenue also, about 4,000 crore, and remaining, about 15,000 crore should come, from the capital gains taxes. On the indirect taxes, we are losing, as I said, about 8,000 crore primarily on the reduction in duties, especially in gold. There is a huge reduction from 15% to 6%. And then there is revenue foregone because of the personal income tax rates and the standard deduction being allowed in the new tax regime.
280, please. Backside, please. Give the mic.
Good afternoon, ma'am. This is Surabhi from Business Today. Ma'am, the angel tax has been abolished, which is a very welcome move. But just wanted to understand that one of the things the angel tax was also doing was checking money laundering concerns. So could you explain how these will be taken care of now? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad to hear it is welcome. You've been raising this issue, as with many others outside of media also, saying, are you considering it? Although it was introduced during the UPA government, and it was introduced in 2012. 2 years had passed, and since after that, when we came in, we tried keeping as a good governance principle, government being a continuum, the tax continued. Although we tried giving carve-outs for startups and also making it simpler, bringing parity for the non-resident Indians, the way in which they've been treated as opposed to the Indian investments and so on. Today we've announced that we will indeed remove it. Exactly the details, Sanjay, would you want to elaborate on it?
Yes, sure, ma'am. So we should be aware that this is actually a tax measure. It's not really a money laundering issue, but money laundering issue was being tackled through a tax measure. So first of all, I want to clarify that this tax, there are other provisions in the income tax itself, first of all, to find out the source of these funds. Number two, there is already, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, which continues to be in existence. So if there is money which is being laundered, money, being paid as a bribe or for use in, other purposes for terrorism, etc., there are enough laws, including the Nyaya Sahita, Bharatiya Nyaya Sahita, and the Prevention of Money Laundering Act to take care of those issues. While on the other hand, now some genuine money for investment, actually, there is this deterrent provision no longer exists, while provisions for money laundering remain, and they should be sufficient to cater to it.
I would add that there are also certain provisions of the Companies Act which can be invoked if there is deliberate undervaluation of shares. So there are other legal remedies. The balance here is between preventing money laundering but accidentally also preventing investment. So that balance is what we are seeking to get it right.
211, backside. Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. Prakash Pedashi from ET Now. My question is, will the increased STT be applicable from April 1 or prospective? And if from April 1, will there be retrospective tax calculation for the increased amount?
It's not retrospective. It is with effect from 1st of October 2024. So we are giving sufficient time for the exchanges and the people, who collect this tax to put their systems in place to be able to collect it. It's not retrospective, it is prospective.
13 11 ठीक 11 11
Ma'am, Karishma here from Business Today. Ma'am, congratulations to you and everybody. Ma'am, my question is on this special assistance to Andhra Pradesh and Bihar. 15,000 crore is the number that you've given for Andhra Pradesh for this financial year. Is there further assistance that you are looking at, or is it going to be need-based in terms of the amount?
I've already mentioned in the budget speech that 15,000 crore is coming through the multilateral development assistance, which we borrow from the multilateral banks, whether it is World Bank or ADB or AIB, whatever. And I've also ended that paragraph by saying further assistance will also be extended.
There is no definitive amount.
No.
152
मैम आलोक प्रियदर्शी फ्रॉम सीएनबीसी आवाज में मैम सवाल यही है कि जिस तरह से आप लोग न्यू टैक्स रिजीम को प्रमोट कर रहे हैं, इस बार भी आप लोगों ने स्लैब में चेंज किया, स्टैंडर्ड डिडक्शन बढ़ाया, तो ये मान के चलें कि न्यू टैक्स रिजीम के जरिए आप मिडिल क्लास को राहत देने की कोशिश की है इस बार। ओल्ड टैक्स रिजीम को लेकर क्या कोई सनसेट क्लॉज है? क्योंकि आपने कहा है कि जो इनकम टैक्स एक्ट है उसका हम लोग कंप्रिहेंसिव रिव्यू करेंगे, तो रिव्यू में क्या ये मान के चले कोई सनसेट टाइम आएगा ओल्ड टैक्स रिजीम को लेकर?
अभी मैं बोल नहीं सकती हूँ। जरूर हमारी इरादा ये है कि सिंपलर टैक्सेशन रजीम होना चाहिए, और सिंपल टैक्स रजीम की ओर अगर हम जा रहे हैं ये रिव्यू के द्वारा, वो ही हमारी मकसद होगा कि सिंपल कर दो। ओल्ड टैक्स रजीम को सिंपल करने के रास्ते पर ही ये नया टैक्स रजीम आया है। सनसेट होगा कि नहीं होगा वो अभी मैं बोल नहीं सकती हूँ, वो रिव्यू करने के बाद ही हम एक डिसीजन लेंगे।
और ये एक आंकड़ा मैं आपको दे दूं कि इस बार पिछली बार जो हमने परिवर्तन किए थे नई टैक्स प्रणाली में, तो 70% लोग अभी तक जो 4 करोड़ के लगभग हमारे पास में रिटर्न प्राप्त हुए हैं पिछले वर्ष के, 70% ने इसको प्रेफर किया है बनिस्बत की पुरानी प्रणाली को। तो बड़ी तेजी से लोग नई प्रणाली की ओर आकर्षित हो रहे हैं और हमारा यही प्रयास रहेगा।
Yes.
Ongoing filing.
Not
yet. I mean, more returns are coming in. Yes.
271
Hi ma'am, this is Sumit Chaturvedi, ET Now. Ma'am, the corporate tax for foreign companies has been slashed to 35%. I want to understand the broad intent of this intention behind this decision, and what kind of benefits to economy increase in investment you are expecting.
You've in your own question answered it. We want more investment to come into this country, so that is why it has been brought down.
$95.
Just to add to that, there was a widened differential between foreign and domestic companies which arose after the tax cut in 2019. When the domestic rates were cut, the foreign rates were not cut. So there was a widening of the gap. With today's change, there is still a higher rate of tax for foreign companies, but it is not now disproportionately higher than domestic. And therefore, this is something where, according to the feedback received from industry, we expect more foreign companies to invest now that this regime is adjusted in this manner.
Good evening, ma'am. This is Pal Singh from Outlook Business. You have earmarked a significant allocation towards rural infrastructure today. So how much of a boost to consumption and overall demand are we expecting here from this allocation?
So it is difficult to quantify what would be the accretion to demand coming from. I mean, the obvious increase is whatever we have increased. But yes, would there be a multiplier? Probably yes. I think with the Awas Yojana Gramin and the Gram Sadak Yojana, these two do have a lot of multiplier effects as well. Traditionally, for capital expenditure, the multiplier has been calculated at somewhere around 2.5 to 3. In the Awas Yojana, it may be a little lower, but yes, there would be a substantial multiplier. I don't have a precise calculation.
But other than the Awas Yojana and Sadak Yojana, Gram Sadak Yojana, there's a major push towards the corridors. For instance, I mentioned in the context of Bihar, I mentioned in the context of Andhra, 2 corridors which are moving, one from Visakhapatnam to Chennai, the other moving from Hyderabad to Bangalore, Buxar, Purnia, and so on, and building of the Gaya node in the Amritsar to Kolkata are all towards building infrastructure in the rural areas in order that we attract more investment and enable transit of goods in those huge corridors. All these are essentially going to the rural areas in a big way. And therefore, it is not just through PM Awas Yojana and Sadak Yojana, but major investments in strengthening the corridors, building nodes, and therefore also in improving the rural infrastructure is happening.
11.
Ma'am, I'm Maria Shakir from NDTV and NDTV Profit. Congratulations for creating history today by becoming the only finance minister for having presented 7 consecutive budgets. Ma'am, my question to you is about the first-timer scheme, because as you said, that employment perhaps sums up the essence of this budget. Would there be more blueprint coming out as to how this first-timers scheme will be playing out, and what will be the role of private sector?
Just 1 minute. See, this Prime Minister's package that I announced has 5 different schemes. The first timers is, I would think, one of the very, very innovative initiative. So what we are doing there is to be able to provide first timers 1 whole month's salary as subsidy. And this will be put into their account as direct benefit transfer, but possibly in tranches. When an employer picks up a first timer, and this is through the EPFO that you get to know that they have paid their provident fund amounts, and therefore the first timer indicator that we are talking about will be established. So they can't just say one of the existing employee is a first timer and claim it. There are enough checks and balances in the system to make sure that indeed the first timer is coming in. And then the first timers will be put through that learning curve, and this will help them to acquire skills so that they become fully productive. This kind of a subsidy giving, 1, you give the first one month's salary. 2, you're also giving both for the employee and for the employer subsidy. So the applicable person for whom it is being given may even draw a wage up to 1 lakh rupees. But to the extent of 15,000 is what you're giving as a subsidy. The installments, as I said, for the first 1 month wage that you want to give will be done over 3 installments, direct into the first time employee's account. One compulsory measure that we are bringing in there is to make sure that the employee undergoes online financial literacy course before claiming the second installment from the government. So he may be a qualified engineer, he may be a diploma holder, he's a first time employee in an office, he becomes a first time employee and the employer also claims that he's been recruited. We try giving him the 15,000 rupees. He may have a salary of 1 lakh, but up to 15,000 rupees is what we are going to give. And in that, if you're giving 3 installments, the first installment will be given. But before he draws the second installment, he should undergo an online financial literacy course so that he can claim the second one. So we are not training him in engineering, we are training him in financial literacy. Post that, Of course, the place where he goes to work, he's going to be working in any case. Then subsidy to be refunded if in case the employer removes him from the work within 12 months. So the employer gets a subsidy as well, but he will have to refund it if within 12 months this first time employer has been removed out of the work. This will cover, and we expect it to cover, 1 crore persons per annum. And the scheme will run for 2 years. So up to 24 months, you can have new employees brought in, new first-time employees brought in, for whom the government will give 15,000 rupees as, from our side, 1 month, what we think, 1 month's salary. Although his salary may be any amount, but to a cap of 1 lakh. And then he undergoes some financial literacy course, post which the second installment and the third installments can be withdrawn, put into his account. But most important is, if the employer removes him within 12 months, the employer will have to refund the subsidy given to the employer. So that's how that scheme works.
278. That's right.
If I may just add, details are available in the budget speech in the annexure on page 31. So there are details of all the 5 schemes in this package. If you go through them, there's considerable amount of detail which you can get.
Hi, good evening. This is Priyashmita from Informist. I have 2 points from the budget that I would like to ask. The first is nominal GDP has been pegged at 10.5%. And we have seen that growth is on a high momentum, and even the RBI has pegged growth at 7.2%, and the Econ survey said that it is going to be between 6.5 to 7%. So a 10.5% nominal GDP looks a little conservative. What is your view on it? And the second is that there's a mention that beyond FY26, you would want to reduce your debt to GDP. And you've mentioned that, the 4% debt to GDP it's a thing of the past. So what do you think is a sustainable debt to GDP or a desirable debt to GDP at this point? Thank you.
What was the first question again?
Conservative nominal GDP projection.
See, 10.5% could be a combination of 7% growth and 3.5% GDP deflator. So a combination of wholesale price plus consumer price could easily be 3.5%. That's a very likely scenario. So 7 plus 3.5, yes, it is slightly conservative, but I don't think it is way off what is likely. Or it could be 6.5% growth and 4% inflation as per the deflator. So I think the number is reasonable, slightly conservative, yes, but we would prefer to achieve the numbers. Second, on the path after 26-27, which has been outlined in the finance minister's speech at the end of the part A. So the commitment, as she has mentioned, is to endeavor to reduce the debt to GDP every year. That is in future the fiscal consolidation path. What is the percentage that would result in that fiscal consolidation is not something that we are disclosing here today or can disclose today. It will depend on circumstances. But there is a commitment to lower the debt to GDP ratio. So if every year it has to be reduced, there will necessarily have to be a particular level of deficit which we cannot exceed. And that will depend on prevailing growth rates, interest rates, and the other parameters which go into the calculation of the debt dynamics. But I can tell you that it is most likely to be a figure not above 4.5%.
249.
मैं सुनील सौरभ बोल रहा हूँ। मैं पहले तो आपको काफी बधाई दे दूं कि बहुत अच्छा बजट आपने पेश की है। दूसरा मुझे ये जानना है कि रेलवे के लिए क्या कुछ खास रहा बजट में?
Which organization you are from?
कौन सा पत्रिका?
पेपर में हूँ, लोक भारती पेपर है।
Sorry?
लोक भारती।
लोक भारती।
तो पहले तो बधाई दे दिया हूँ मैं आपका, बहुत अच्छा बजट आपने पेश की है और रिकॉर्ड भी की है। 7 साल से लगातार आप वित्त मंत्री के रूप में काम कर। मेरा कहना है कि रेलवे के लिए क्या कुछ खास हुआ, क्योंकि कोई जानकारी हम लोग को अभी तक नहीं मिली कि रेलवे के लिए क्या गया है। दूसरा, मैम, रेलवे में सीनियर सिटीजन्स को कंसेशन मिलता था। आप यहाँ पीआईबी में है, पीआईबी जर्नलिस्ट को भी कंसेशन मिलता था। कोरोना में वो बंद हो गया। कोरोना को ख़त्म हुए भी 2-3 साल हो गए हैं, तो फिर से ये बहाल नहीं हुआ। क्या इसकी उम्मीदें हम लोग कर सकते हैं कि आगे बहाल होगी या नहीं?
रेलवे का जो एक्सपेंडिचर बजट है नेक्स्ट ईयर, इट्स 2,55,393 crores, which is the highest ever, and it's a very substantial increase in recent years. So that is a very large amount of investment in the railway. So I think there is a very adequate provision.
जर्नलिस्ट के लिए कंसेशन
ठीक है, सुना।
277 प्लीज।
इसमें सीनियर सिटीजन और पीआईबी जर्नलिस्ट को भी जो स्लैब में रिवीजन हुआ है उसमें फायदा है। सीनियर सिटीजन्स को फैमिली पेंशन में स्टैंडर्ड डिडक्शन का फायदा हुआ है। रेलवे में, अच्छा ठीक।
हेलो मैम, दिस साइड हर्ष कुमार, दिस साइड फ्रॉम बिजनेस।
वो बजट का फायदा जो दिया है सर, वो भी तो मिलेगा सीनियर सिटीजन्स को और सबको, रेलवे में भी मिलेगा।
Hello ma'am, Harsh Kumar this side from Business Standard newspaper. Ma'am, during your speech you mentioned about the FDI liberalization. Can you give a bit detail about it?
We are trying to, since 2014, bring in ease of doing business in India, and in every sector where there was only 26% allowed for FTA, we raised it to 49, and then where it is possible, we've raised it to 74, and so on. So there's been a consistent, continuing effort to relax our policy towards FTA. First, it went sector by sector. Then there was this approach taken so that most of which can go through the automatic route. So in that process, further simplification, if necessary, we are willing to do, is what is conveyed.
Also, ma'am, you have like increased the Mudra loan limit to 20 lakhs, like that cap. So can we expect the increase in Shishu, Tarun, like their types increase? So how much it will be? Can you give detail on that?
We've said this only today. See how this works.
Okay, thank you.
I request you to please one question each person. 123 please. Here.
Shrimi Chaudhary here from Business Standard. I just wanted to understand that budget proposes withdrawal of equalization levy. So if you could just give some explanation of what led to that, what is the intention behind that, keeping in mind the pact between India and US which has ended on June 30th.
No, as the Pillar 1, Pillar 2 negotiations have been going on since 22. And since then, one of the things which was becoming more than obvious was, if at all we are going through this Pillar 1 and Pillar 2, which we intend to, the negotiations and the OECD, backed by the US administration, have all been pushing for this. We wanted a fair solution, so negotiations have been going